Hey guys, Future Tori here. So originally I was planning to make this vlog more spoiler free, but I hit a point where I realized the way I wanted to talk about this book was calling for some spoilers. Like I just could not discuss this book the way I wanted to without spoilers, and I kind of wish I had realized that for Vanity Fair as well, but oh well, that's all done. So I just want to warn you guys going into this that it is going to have spoilers. So if you have not read it and you want to avoid spoilers for whatever reason, maybe keep that in mind. I will say the first clip or two, there's not a ton of big spoilers necessarily, because it is the beginning of the book, but after that it definitely gets into some spoilers, so consider yourself forewarned and hope you enjoy the vlog. Hi friends, so once again I have not started this dang vlog that I need to start at the beginning of the month. We're a week into February and I have not started my Gone with the Wind vlog yet, but I have started reading Gone with the Wind. So here is my copy. I am a little over 100 pages into it. I'm about, 120 pages into it, and I am really enjoying it a lot more than I thought I would. Like, I really didn't know how I would feel going into this book, but I already feel like I'm going to enjoy it even more than Vanity Fair, which, in case you're watching this and you don't know, you haven't heard yet, you're new to my channel or whatever, I did a read-along. I'm doing a read-along of Vanity Fair and Gone with the Wind because they have very similar main characters, and many people believed that Gone with the Wind was a retelling of Vanity Fair, although the author, Margaret Mitchell, claims that she never read Vanity Fair. That being said, I'll get back to that in a second anyway, but because so many people saw it that way, I thought it would be fun to read them back to back, so that's what we've been doing. So I did just finish Vanity Fair last month, and we're reading Gone with the Wind for February and March. Sorry, March and April. I think even at the beginning of this I said we're a week into February, but it's a week into March. Sorry. But anyway, it is March 7th. I am really enjoying Gone with the Wind. Like I said, it just has a richer writing style. I feel like the character development and just the character descriptions, getting to know the characters, has a richer depth of detail that I am really enjoying. It's also fun because I feel like Vanity Fair is more of a kind of third-party observer writing this story, as opposed to Gone with the Wind being more of a like third-person narrative omnipotent, is that what it's called? Anyway, where they're able to, the writer gets into their head more, so there's a little bit more understanding of what's going on in Scarlett's head, whereas with Becky Sharp, we don't really get in her head much. We just kind of see what she does, and because of that, it makes the characters, not just her, but all the characters, feel more flat, which I talked a bit about in my Vanity Fair vlogs. But here we're really able to see inside Scarlett's head, and so we're able to see greater depth in her, I think, which I've really enjoyed. I also feel like the war is taking a little bit more of a role in this book. It's a little bit more of a conversation than it is in Vanity Fair. I mean, it is in Vanity Fair, but it feels like it's brushed aside a little bit more, so I'm appreciating that. It is interesting to me, though, that Margaret Mitchell claimed she never read Vanity Fair, because just barely I read a little portion where two of the characters are talking about books, and they talk about Thackeray versus Dickens, and so I'm like, okay, did you really not read Vanity Fair? Because Thackeray's most popular work is Vanity Fair, so if you're talking about William Thackeray in that way about how he writes, you have to have read Vanity Fair. Like, why would you read anything else by Thackeray and not read Vanity Fair? I mean, I guess it's possible, but it's not very likely to me. So it's interesting that she claims she never read that, where right in the book she mentions Thackeray, and pretty close to the beginning too. So anyway, who knows if she actually read Vanity Fair, but I feel like that's a pretty good hint that she probably did. And this probably was at least in part inspired by that, considering, like I said, she decided to mention him so close to the beginning. Again, not necessarily true, but it was very interesting to see. So I'm going to stop here. I have it on mute, but I'm watching some reading sprints, not live. They were pre-recorded, I think last year. Sometimes I just am bored, and like if I can't focus on reading for too long, it's fun to me to watch previously recorded reading sprints from booktubers, and just kind of do it along with them, because that way I can kind of get automatic breaks in my reading and be able to listen to people talk and stuff. So it just adds a little extra flavor to my reading when I'm struggling to focus. But anyway, that's what I'm doing right now. It's Becca in the Books channel if you're curious about who I'm watching exactly. But anyway, we'll stop there. I'll be finishing my reading for today, and then I'm working on Cranford as well, so that's what I'll be doing. But I will update you next time I have additional thoughts on Gone with the Wind, and hopefully it will continue in this positive vein, because like I said, I'm really enjoying it. So hey guys, so it is March 16th and I am now, I think I just hit the 300, or I'm almost at the 300 page mark in Gone with the Wind. I am still really enjoying this. I will say the repetition of describing the war and kind of what's going on with it feels a little bit redundant and a little bit dragging, but not enough for me to dislike it. I feel like long books always have something about them that makes them a little bit of a slog at certain points. Not always, but a lot of the time. So I was expecting that on some level going into this. I don't necessarily have a ton of new thoughts. I will say it is interesting reading this after Vanity Fair, knowing that a lot of people compared this to Vanity Fair when it was released. Obviously the time period as far as being in the middle of a war that's really impactful on the country that this is set in is very similar to Vanity Fair. However, the characters and the plot are not all that similar. However, I do feel like Scarlett O'Hara and Melanie do really have a lot in common, and their friendship even has a lot in common with Becky and Amelia in Vanity Fair. They have that very, you know, one side, Scarlett / Becky, are very manipulative. They don't really care about other people. They're both very selfish. I will say I feel like Becky is more of a social climber. That being said, I feel like Scarlett already is in a very good social position, so it makes sense that she's not as driven by that. But she does like attention. She does want to be noticed, so she does hang on to that. And then we also have Melanie and Amelia. I mean, even their names are kind of similar, but they are very pure and innocent and sweet and good, and kind of the only people that are a little manipulative and mildly wicked main characters really respect in any way and kind of care about in any way, because they're so good that how can you not care about them? And so that's definitely playing a role, and it's interesting to see that dynamic in this compared to Vanity Fair. Rhett Butler is also a very interesting character in this. I haven't solidly decided how I feel about him. There's a lot of things I really don't like about him. Obviously, he is very selfish and self-centered, which is why I think he kind of does make a good match for Scarlett. I feel like they both are driven by that desire for their own pleasure as opposed to really caring about anybody else. However, you can tell Rhett's a bit more mature in that idea of life. He is really confident in who he is and is aware of his flaws and doesn't really care about them, but he does have an awareness of what other people around him sort of deserve in a lot of ways. Like with Melanie, he is very caring and gentle with her. He is very kind to many other women, although in a lot of ways that seems to be just him being flirtatious and not really him actually caring about them. But I don't know, I feel like there is some level of him having an awareness of other people's needs and just kind of choosing whether or not he is willing to help them with those needs, as opposed to him just not caring about other people's needs at all, or only caring about them, if that makes sense. However, one thing I will say too, even though I do feel like Scarlett and Rhett have very similar views on the world, although I think Rhett is a more mature version of their personality type, I guess, I don't really understand why Rhett is still pursuing Scarlett. He seems to view her as very clever, and yet there's many points where it is very clear that she is very not just self-centered, but also shallow. Like, a lot in this book, it's talked about how clever she is and how intelligent, and yet there's so much she doesn't understand and isn't willing to observe. And so I don't really understand why, first of all, it keeps trying to describe her as very smart and not as almost dumb as other girls, I guess, within this story. And yet it doesn't actually show her being that way. She seems like she's just as shallow as everyone else. I think she'll develop more in this book and mature a little bit into more of where Rhett's at, but we'll see how that goes about. But yeah, as of right now, I don't really understand why Rhett is so taken with her when she clearly is so shallow and just flirty and is totally not aware of the world around her at all in any way. Like, I don't understand what's drawing Rhett to her as opposed to many of the other girls in this story. Her feelings towards Ashley also really bother me. I just feel like she needs to move on, and I mean, I've mentioned before, I really don't like cheating in books, and not that cheating is happening necessarily, but I guess it really shows how selfish Scarlett is, because she just completely ignores the fact that he's married. Like, yes, she's aware, and she does, like, little things to acknowledge that, but clearly she doesn't really intend to let his marriage stop her in anything she does. Like, when he comes home to visit, she's not even, like, sort of taken aback, like, maybe I shouldn't say anything, or like, no, she the whole time is very intentionally trying to find a time to talk to him and talk about how much she loves him, regardless of whether or not he's married. Like, it doesn't even really cross her mind that it should pull her back much at all, beyond like not doing things in front of Melanie. So anyway, that's not my favorite thing, although it does add interest to the story. But I will say I do think I am liking this still better than Vanity Fair. I still loved Vanity Fair for sure. In fact, I did just watch a miniseries adaptation that recently was released, I think just a couple years ago, and really, really loved it. It was on Amazon Prime and it was absolutely delightful. But I think just the writing in this, the character development in this is a little bit more fulfilling to me and a little bit deeper, has more depth to it, and so it's just keeping me a lot more intrigued. So we'll see how it continues to go on. I also do like that I feel like Rhett Butler is getting a little more development than Rawdon did. Not that I think they're necessarily the same character, but as far as, you know, our malicious, conniving main character falling in love with this man and he's kind of the main love interest for that character, I do feel like Rhett and Rawdon have that similar role, and I feel like Rhett is being more fully developed so far. So hopefully, I feel like he'll get a little bit more agency in his story than I felt like Rawdon did. So anyway, I'm going to be reading my 18 pages today, get to page 300, and I will update you once I have more thoughts on this. Hey friends, so I'm gonna keep this relatively quick because I need to get some homework done before I go to work in a little bit. But anyway, I do find my emotions towards Scarlett are very up and down. Like, there are moments where I really appreciate her for her strength. She is very strong-spirited. She's willing to do what she needs to do to accomplish what she desires. But she's so self-centered, and there's so many times where I feel like she's just on the edge of being willing to really care about someone else. And then every time she pulls back, especially with Melanie, she gets to points where she is sympathetic towards Melanie and she does seem to care about her on some level. And then she immediately pulls back into thinking she's just ridiculous and silly, and it's just and honestly hating her because she married the man that Scarlett was in love with. She married Ashley, and so she's very jealous of this woman, and yet there is that part of her that recognizes that Melanie is such a good person. It's interesting to see the differences between the way Margaret Mitchell approaches these two characters versus these two types of characters versus how William Thackeray approached his characters that were very similar. Obviously, Vanity Fair is a satire, so the extremes are very strong, and in that book, Amelia is very, very good and Becky is very, very not. However, I do feel like in that book we are able to get into Amelia's head and see her flaws a little bit more, and so it adds a little bit more depth to her character by the end of the story. Especially in her relationship with Dobbin, I feel like we see a lot of flaws in her that add depth to her character, whereas with Becky, we are never really inside her head. The only times we get inside her head are when she is kind of plotting, but even that, we're not getting a deep dive into her plotting. We're just able to kind of see the actions she takes, and we're able to hear a bit about things she's noticing about other people that she can use. But I just feel like we don't really get to know Becky very well, despite the fact that she's kind of considered the main character in a lot of ways in that book. But in Gone with the Wind, I feel like it's the opposite. I feel like we're able to see inside Scarlett's head. It's all really from her perspective, and so there's a lot more depth to her. We're able to see, yes, all of her flaws and how self-centered she is and how judgmental she is, but we're also able to see into her heart a little bit. We're able to see that she does have some level of sympathy for other people, that she really looks up to her mother and is really proud to have her mother as her mother despite their disagreements and differences. She also really cares for her father, and we're able to see that, as well as just some of the other people in her town. She has some level of care for these men that have courted her and stuff, even though she doesn't treat them all that great because she just kind of uses them for attention. But when they have died in the war, she still feels that heartache, and she really shows that she genuinely had some level of care for them. And so it's really interesting to watch that, where Becky, when we're seeing her at Waterloo, she does not seem to have any concern, hardly at all, for anyone who's fighting, even her husband. However, while in Vanity Fair, Amelia gets a little bit more interest and depth to her, we don't really see that with Melanie. I feel like I'm really not able to get much, like, Melanie just feels like a very flat character because she is so perfect. Like, Amelia is perfect, but like I said, we get to see a little bit of her flaws. Melanie, we just haven't, and I don't know if that's going to change, but I do find it very interesting, that difference of being able to see in one head more than the other and how that impacts how we feel as about the characters. I also, even though Vanity Fair is a satire, and I think that's very important to point out, for the purposes of comparing these two books, it is interesting that Vanity Fair, where the female characters are not as well explored, I mean, like I said, Amelia a bit, but still not a ton, was written much, much earlier, like a century earlier, and it was also written by a man as opposed to a woman, whereas Gone with the Wind was written by a woman a century after Vanity Fair. And so just changing views as well as the perspective of the author themselves, I think does have an impact. Again, Vanity Fair, I don't want to be too unfair to William Thackeray because he was writing a satire. Like, he wasn't trying necessarily to create super real characters necessarily. But again, in comparing these two books, it is interesting to at least consider that aspect of it. It is going well so far. I am currently just after they have gone back to Tara and they are finding Scarlett's father there and some of their slaves still there. However, her mother and sisters have not appeared, and Gerald, the dad, has made it sound like the sisters possibly made it. Where they are, I don't know, because they haven't shown up on page, but he made it sound like they might have pulled through, whereas the mother, it sounds like, likely didn't. But we'll see how everything comes together. I'm very curious to see how the rest of this book goes. Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention was Rhett Butler. He is an enigma to me. Like, I do not understand him. I feel like at this point I'm leaning towards the idea that he is very selfish, but he's also a lot more observant and has a bit more pity than Scarlett does. I think Scarlett, I mentioned in a previous clip that I think Rhett Butler is more matured into their personality type than Scarlett is. And because of that, I feel like we're able to see that he maybe has a better heart than Scarlett does, but I don't know if I could say that solidly because he's clearly very selfish and very arrogant and often helps people simply for the help they can provide for him later. But then also with these same people, he's willing to he likes to push buttons, I feel like. And as such, I'm curious to come to a better understanding of why he decided to go to war right when he was trying to help Scarlett and the others escape. After all this time, he's laughed at the war and thought it was silly, and something about watching this young boy collapse and just this other older man help him somehow pushed him into deciding to join the army. So I feel like there we can see maybe a little bit of pity, a little bit of kindness that is in his heart. I feel like his interactions with Melanie also show that. However, he also shocks Scarlett, and there's definitely this sense that he likes the fact that he shocked her. He likes the fact that he's pushing her buttons by leaving her. So I feel like there's definitely this weird balance in him of caring about other people while also being very self-centered and really just liking to push people's buttons and just shocking people, like not even just pushing their buttons, but genuinely like seeking to surprise them and go against their expectations for him. And so I'm very curious to continue to watch him and get to know him better and see how his relationship with Scarlett develops, because clearly something's going to happen with them. I know that they're both the main characters, so clearly something's going to happen, but how and in what way, especially because he doesn't seem to want to get married and he almost wants her to be his mistress. I'm curious to see if that's how things come together and just exactly what brings Scarlett to make that decision when she clearly kind of hates him a lot. I really don't know how their relationship will go, because I think they are similar in a lot of ways, yes, but I think they're different in ways that really will impact their ability to be together long term. So we'll see how it goes. I will update you either when I have more to say, or maybe just at the end, as at the end of this first half that I'm reading for the month, and just, yeah, depending on how things go and what I end up thinking about it. So anyway, that's that for now, and I will talk to you in the next clip.
So, very brief little clip, but Scarlett just killed someone, and I just was not expecting that from this book, like, at all. So, not much to say about it because it just happened, but I wanted to capture my first shock on camera. I just am shook that this book went in that direction. I mean, honestly, at this point, I really don't know where it's going to go, but I did not think that was going to happen. So, yeah.
Okay, so I finished my reading for today. That last clip you would have seen was during the reading that I'm doing today on the 24th. I know I did just do an update either yesterday or the day before, and it's a little unusual for me to do it this regularly, but I just felt really inspired by this section as far as just things to talk about. So this is a section where we see Scarlett really taking charge of Tara. She's kind of become very intense and strict. She's really fighting back her own emotions, but also she's recognizing that she kind of likes this new hardened side to her a little bit. One of the first things that really stood out to me in this section of reading, so I'm in chapter 26, I haven't finished it. I've only been reading 18 pages a day, I think I've mentioned that. So I'm partially through chapter 26, and in the beginning of chapter 26 we see her, like I said, taking charge of Tara, but it also takes a moment to talk about her father Gerald and the description of his feeling of being so lost and how he's behaving because of the loss of his wife was so beautiful. So I'm going to read just a few sentences that really described his experience, basically his PTSD that he's struggling with and the symptoms associated with it. After losing his wife. So it explains that Ellen was the audience before which the blustering drama of Gerald O'Hara had been played. Now the curtain had been rung down forever, the footlights dimmed, and the audience suddenly vanished, while the stunned old actor remained on his empty stage waiting for his cues. That was such a beautiful, like, description to me, just because it really shows that sense of he's just very lost, like he is stuck in time. I think I've heard a lot of descriptions similar to that of like being stuck in a moment of time and not being able to get out of it. It later describes him as feeling like he was stuck in a moment where his wife was just in the other room. And that just is so heartbreaking to me. I like feel like I'm getting choked up just thinking about it. But it's really, that was such powerful imagery to me. And again, I think I've mentioned this before, that this book is just really, it's not a satire like Vanity Fair. It has very similar characters to Vanity Fair, but it's not a satire, and therefore it's going a lot grittier than Vanity Fair did. This book really is focused on the loss and the grief. There were many moments in Vanity Fair where it talked about how we step away from Amelia whenever she's feeling grief. Whenever she's thinking about her losses, Thackeray decides to say, you know, we'll leave her in her grief for now, because the purpose of the book was to be satirical, humorous on some level. It wasn't meant to have that grit, but Gone with the Wind does not have that limitation, and so I like that we're able to dig deeper into these characters and feel a lot more of their heartache, and just the power of seeing this great man who is so brokenhearted that he is just a shell of himself is just so heartbreaking to watch. Additionally, like I mentioned in the last little clip, Scarlett killed someone. She killed a Yankee that showed up at the house, and all I really want to say about that, beyond the shock factor, was also her interaction with Melanie after this happens. Melanie is so surprising to me, and she's surprising to Scarlett as well when she talks about how Melanie has this look of triumph when she realizes what Scarlett has done, as opposed to looking at her in horror or anything like you would expect from someone as sweet as Melanie. And I think Melanie is just a very principled person, and I'm starting to, as I reflected on that scene and then other scenes that I've seen of her really defending Rhett Butler, not just because he's kind to her, but also because of his opinions, that she's like, my husband shares those same opinions and he's a soldier, but he still shares them, so I'm going to like respect Rhett because he has valid opinions, valid ideas about the situation. So really, despite the fact that she's such a sweet and gentle character, she is also so strong and has such a bold and a principled way of going about life, which I just love. Principled characters, like, they're my favorite type of characters. They could be, and the thing about principled characters is they can be really great, or they can, I would say Scarlett in a lot of ways is a principled character, or at least she's on her way to being so. I think she could be pretty wishy-washy just based on circumstances, but I think she's coming into her principled nature. I think Becky Sharp was a very principled person as far as she knew what she wanted and she stuck with that. Not that I would ever want to hang out with her because I don't think her principles are very great, but I do feel like there's something powerful about reading about a principled character as opposed to someone who just changes what they think is right based on context, like, all the time. Like, I understand that some contexts you do need to readjust your principles, but if you're constantly readjusting your principles, then are you really principled? Probably not. So I really appreciate that about Melanie, and I really liked that scene where Scarlett has this moment of admiration for Melanie, which she's had a few slight moments of in the past, but it's just nice. I hope that they develop a stronger relationship. I don't expect them to ever be best friends, but I hope that Scarlett continues to learn to appreciate Melanie. Although if Melanie discovers who Scarlett really is, I think she might be appalled and not want to be around her. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Two other things I want to mention. The first thing is in regards to the slaves. So it talks about a lot in this chapter that the slaves ended up leaving the area when the Yankees came out of fear. And it's interesting because everybody's saying they saw the Yankees coming and they ran for the hills and that's why they left. But I can't help but wonder if a lot of them left because they saw the fact that the Yankees were winning as an opportunity to get away from being a slave. Like, yes, there was so much more to the Civil War than just slavery. I think sometimes in schools and stuff, it's taught almost like slavery was the biggest issue, and it really wasn't. It was kind of a side thing and just like a moral standpoint for the Yankees or for the North to be able to stand on to make their cause seem even more important, therefore bringing a lot more people in because of the morality behind it as opposed to just politics, if that makes sense. But they still represented freedom for the slaves. And so it's interesting to read these Southerners talking about the running away of their slaves and saying, oh, it was because they were afraid of the Yankees coming. Whereas maybe a lot of them were joining the Yankees. Maybe a lot of them were running away because they wanted this opportunity. And so it's very interesting. I would love to learn more about some of the psychology behind slaves' reactions to the Civil War. I mean, it's probably hard to find because a lot of them couldn't write. Unfortunately, we're illiterate, and so we only have so much information, and a lot of it's going to be secondhand, but I would like to see if I can learn more about that just because I don't know if Margaret Mitchell is going off of genuine feelings by some slaves or if she's going based off of what the South would think. Also, let me know if you know if Margaret Mitchell was really racist or not, because I'm very curious to know if she is just writing from the South's perspective and so therefore she is trying to think like the South, think like how the South would think, romanticize slavery in a way that the South would in order to make themselves feel better about the situation, or if she actually believes a lot of these ideas or holds a lot of these opinions about the situation. So please let me know that. But anyway, the other brief thing I want to mention, and another really quick sentence I want to read, came right at the end of my reading, and Scarlett has gone to the Fontaine's home, who was a family that I honestly don't really remember much from the beginning. I believe there was a man amongst them that she was was one of her guys at the beginning that she was dragging along and trying to lead on. But we have 3 of the girls in the Fontaine family who are there, including a grandmother, and they don't know that Scarlett's mother is dead or what's been happening at her home. So Scarlett's telling them, but she can't bring herself to talk about her mother, so she skips over that part. And then the grandma notices this, and so she tells the other younger girls to leave, and she wants to talk to Scarlett alone, and so she does, and that's when Scarlett tells the whole story, because this grandma is just easy to talk to. She's not showing too much sympathy that's gonna make Scarlett cry. She's very understanding and very tough. I really liked this old Miss grandma that she's talking about. But anyway, Scarlett mentions that she feels like her mother dying is the worst thing that could have happened, and this grandma kind of stops her and is like, don't ever let yourself reach the point where the worst thing that could ever happen has happened, because then you're not afraid anymore, and that can be dangerous. And there was a quote that was really interesting to me that I want to read and discuss a little bit. It says, "God intended women to be timid, frightened creatures, and there's something unnatural about a woman who isn't afraid. Scarlett, always have something to fear, even as you have something to love." And I was thinking about that, and I don't necessarily obviously agree with the idea of God intending women to be timid, frightened creatures. I don't think that's the right adjective I would use. I would say that God intended all of his people to be sympathetic and have love in their hearts always. And so the part of that quote that I do really like is, always have something to fear, even as you save something to love. To me, I feel like if you are unafraid, it is because you don't love anything. It's because and bravery and being unafraid are different things. Like, being brave or being courageous means that you overcome your fears, you do things despite your fears. But I think if you lack fear completely, that is so dangerous in many ways. Not just like personally you could get in trouble, but also just in general, it means that you don't love things or even love yourself as deeply as you should. And I feel like God intended mankind or humankind to always have something to fear, because they always have something to love. And so I really liked that idea as I thought about it. Again, I don't agree with the women being frightened. I don't think that's the right adjective, as I said, but that whole section of what God intended for us to be, I also feel like I would reword that first part to say God intended all people, and probably, like I said, use different adjectives. But again, that idea of if you don't have anything to fear, then you're not loving anything, and that's just a life not worth living, practically. And so I need to go really soon, but I guess I also wanted to mention in relation to that, it kind of reminds me of Joanna from Hunger Games, where she, in the second film, I can't remember if it's in the book, but in the film she mentions that that Snow can't hurt her because she has no one left that she loves. And you can just see how lonely and isolated she is, and that she's living a life that is very broken and halved. Like, she's not able to experience things. So yes, she has no fear. You can really see that in her, but it's because she doesn't love anyone, because she doesn't have that feeling. And there are moments where you can see that she probably has more affection for some of the people around her, like Finnick and Peeta and Katniss, than she lets on. But you can see that because she has no fear, she is very isolated and lonely, because it also means she has no love. I feel like I'm just rambling. Anyway, those were my thoughts. Like I said, I need to go get to work, so I'm gonna stop there, and I will share thoughts with you whenever I have them. Hey guys, so I just finished filming my March wrap up, and I thought while I was here I may as well give my final thoughts on Gone with the Wind for the month. So I did hit the halfway point. I'm at part 4 where I was supposed to be at. I don't honestly have much more to add since the last time I checked in with you guys. I really am still enjoying it. There's no decrease in enjoyment for sure. I will say one thing that has been added since I last checked in was the character of William. I'm very interested to see what role he ends up playing in this story because he's a character who has just suddenly appeared and he hasn't been in it so far. So I'm curious to see what his addition will mean for the growth of the characters and their relationships. I really am also interested to see how things go with Ashley as he has returned. Very exciting. I really liked that moment where Melanie sees him and recognizes him and runs out to meet him, and Will stops Scarlett from doing the same thing and very much points out, you know, this is Melanie's husband, it's not your husband, like, and recognizing, like, I know you love him, but you're too late, basically. You just need to get it through your head that you're too late. You can't, nothing can be changed. I also feel like we're getting hints that Ashley loves Melanie more than maybe he did before. Like, I've always been of the opinion that he really does care for Melanie despite what Scarlett may think about it. But I think the fact that he referred to Melanie finally as beloved in one of his letters coming home, it's almost like this time he spent in that prison camp may have prompted him to realize Melanie's value in a much greater way. And so I'm very curious to see at what point Scarlett finally gets it through her head that Ashley isn't going to be hers, and like that's just the way it is, and she needs to move on with her life and her affections. And it's very possible it will be soon, not just because Ashley seems to have developed a greater appreciation for Melanie, but also because Scarlett has changed so much in her as she's needed to be a survivor and really needed to take charge in a way she's never had to before. She can't just flounce around anymore. She has to really take responsibility for her life. And so I feel like that change in her may make her more inclined to forget Ashley. Hopefully, maybe, we'll see. It's so obvious that Ashley and her would never work long term. Like, it's all just passion on really both sides. And even though Ashley has much better control of that passion than Scarlett does, but still, it's not a long-term affection that they could develop, whereas Melanie and Ashley clearly have a long-term emotion involved in their attraction to each other that will be much more effective and successful. So yeah, I'm very curious to see how things go from here. I'm curious to see how Rhett Butler comes back into the picture, because I'm sure he will. And yeah, see when he appears and how things get shaken up from here, because I'm really not sure where this book is going to go from here. I mean, the war is over and Ashley's alive, and yeah, there's obviously room for more story, but there's a lot of different directions it could go in. So I'm very curious to see how it goes. And yeah, I'll share my thoughts in part 2 of this vlog, but that's really all I have to add. I guess the other thing I want to mention actually is Melanie's character growth. I kind of mentioned it in my last clip, but I am really impressed. I like seeing Scarlett appreciate Melanie more and Melanie's work ethic and strength. It's nice to see Scarlett really respecting Melanie in a way that she hasn't before because of everything that's happened and that connection that's developed between them. And I hope that connection of respect, of mutual respect, will continue to grow and not fall apart. But I mean, we'll see what happens. Like I said, I really don't know. So anyway, we're gonna end there for this vlog. Thank you so much for watching. If you've been reading Gone with the Wind with me, or if you've just read it before, let me know your thoughts and opinions on everything I said. I hope you enjoyed this, and yeah, I think that's where I'm gonna wrap it up. So again, thank you for watching. Hope you're having a wonderful day, and I will see you next time. Bye!